sitting on my desk back home.
You want to know how to get on BattleBots? Is that why you're here? That's like
could have re-entered
3 buildings over. You're in the wrong building. This is an argument. I thought you wanted confrontation.
I heard the gas joinings are really bad ideas.
They create rules, so I don't know if you want one.
For a 30-pounder, I got Rob Knight's lesson.
So, hey everybody, you're here to see about preparing and applying for BattleBots. I'm Peter Abrahamson. I'm a producer on the show. I used to be a competitor back in the day. I used to build robots. Don't do that.
He's like, sure, man. I can help you out with it.
I'm Mike Jeffries. I'm a competitor on the show. I'm the team captain of the Chaos Corps and have been the driver of Bombshell for the last 2 seasons.
And we're the peanut gallery.
Good.
So, a little bit of background on us and why what we say has any relevance to you actually getting on the show is probably going to be a bit useful. So, I first competed in 2006 with a robot called Ruiner, which is pictured there. It was a 60-pound fighting robot, and it was kinda okay-ish. First fight it won. It also blew up a $300 motor in that fight, and the second fight it lost and got retired because it was kind of bad. And if you're wondering what it's covered in, that's watermelon. Don't ever test your robot on fruit. You'll find chunks of rotted fruit months later in places you can't even imagine.
It was a sweet video, though. I remember that.
It was a great video. So since then, I've been designing and building fighting robots, mostly between 150 grams and 30 pounds. This is a good chunk of the robots I've built. Over that time, I built somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 robots. You kind of lose count after a while. And I've had at least 250 fights. And the big thing that gives me any kind of reason to be up here telling you how to get on the show is I've gone through this process. I led the team that built Bombshell, and we've been on the last 2 seasons of BattleBots with the 2 different versions of it.
So I started competing back in 1994 at the first USA Robot Wars with my teammate Mark Satrakian, Team Sinister, and went through all of the years of Robot Wars into BattleBots and through Long Beach and the pay-per-views in Vegas, and then of course to Comedy Central, which I built a super heavyweight. Don't do those things. Don't ever build heavy like that. It just ruins your back. Built Ronin. Then when BattleBots kind of ended at Comedy Central, I started working a lot with the Zozbots, doing 1-pound robots. We had a whole arena set up, and we would run events. Had a decent robot, made it to 2nd place. Now I am when BattleBots came back, I was asked, okay, so you're gonna build for us? And I did a quick budget, and I went, you know, I may not build this time. It's getting a little expensive for me, and last time it almost created a divorce, so we'll just stop right there. Then Greg said, well, what do you want to do? I said, what do you need me to do? And so I became like a technical advisor for the show, for dealing with being between the robot builders and the production. And I've now become a producer for the show.
So that's kind of the background of why what we're saying has any relevance to you. So we do generally know what we're talking about and can talk to it from the 2 major perspectives. So my focus tonight is talking about from the I want to be on the show perspective. Peter's going to be more talking about what the show's looking for in the teams that they're going to be bringing onto the show. So how do you actually go from I want to do it to being there?
So it always starts with an idea. What is your concept of the robot? You know, it usually starts as a cocktail napkin sketch. Everybody thinks, oh my God, gotta have fire. I want to have this, and I want to have that. And that's the great way to sort of start thinking out of the box, big ideas. But, you know, you got to also read the rules. You got to understand the rules. You got to know what you're allowed to put on your robot and not put on your robot. Machine guns are not allowed on a BattleBot.
Yeah. Modified
They
paintball
won't.
guns? Modified paintball guns? Maybe. So the nice thing is, I first was getting into the sport back during the initial run of BattleBots, and back then the rule book was thicker than this laptop. Now the rules are what?
pages.
16 pages. So it's a lot easier to actually get all of this information and remember it.
First step, obviously, when you're starting to think about a 250-pound robot, you're going to need help. You're going to want some other people there with you to be able to do this. So you're going to want to form a team.
So for us, the local crew, the Atlanta team, we created the Chaos Corp. And most of the builders on the team are also active competitors at Robot Battles events, which are the next 2 days here at Dragon Con.
By the way, our nickname on production was the Southern All-Stars. Well, you guys were the fucking cream of the crop, so of course.
So a team's great, but what do you actually need on your team? Because you don't want one person trying to do everything. That's a great way to end up in the pits the last day of filming, injured and needing to recruit other people to help build your robot.
I can fight with robots with 9 fingers.
So one of the core things for BattleBots in particular is you need a captain. This is the person who's usually the one with the camera shoved in their face and a microphone taped to them somewhere, who's having to explain why something just caught fire. You need a designer. This may be the same person as the captain, it may not be. This is the person who's really handling a lot of the nuts and bolts details of how this robot's actually going to come together. Your designer and fabricator are probably going to be 2 different people because those are very different skill sets. You're not necessarily going to have someone who's a great designer, who's also a great welder and a great machinist, and can actually handle everything all at once. And that's the core of actually just building a functional robot. But this is television. So beyond just a box that does the thing you want it to do, it needs to look good doing it. So you need someone who's got at least part of their focus on the art and the aesthetics of the team. If you show up in jeans and a t-shirt with an unpainted metal box, that's not going to make great television. So with us on the Chaos Corps, we actually had some people on our team who a good portion of their effort during the first build was making sure that the team and the robot and everything all had this cohesion to the look of it, that when we were finally out in Los Angeles filming this thing, it made sense. Once filming's over, then a lot of the real work happens, because this show doesn't exist without an audience. And social media is how you build that audience. So all of the teams, at least most of the teams at this point, have a Facebook page, they've got Twitter accounts, they've got Instagrams, and we're interacting with the audience and building that following that's going to be watching the show. And that's what's going to keep the show going, because they realize they love it, they tell their friends to watch it, and it just grows and grows and grows the audience. And the less fun jobs on the team, you've got logistics and finances, because someone has to make sure everything that you need for your robot gets purchased, make sure it actually shows up where it needs to show up. A little story there is we actually, for this season of BattleBots, ordered material from a supplier, and they waited 2 weeks to ship. We had 6 weeks to build the robot, and we were already 2 weeks behind schedule. So someone handling the logistics and making sure stuff like that is at least there as fast as possible, and everyone knows when the material is going to show up is critical, because we could not have adjusted our build plans without knowing everything was late. And that really changed our approach to the build season. And finances are just, they're a nightmare. The great question of how much does it cost, the typical answer is all of it, and that's pretty true. Robots, especially at this scale, are going to cost whatever you're able to put into them, because there's so much going on between the initial build, spares, travel, just time away from home, and even just the logistics of you need to build this thing so you're not necessarily at home cooking your own meals. You may be eating out because you don't have time to go cook. So someone who actually handles the budget and makes sure you don't spend all of your money, just the money you can afford to spend, is pretty important.
Spend all the money.
Spend all the money. Yeah, that's usually what happens. But no, that's not. That's bad too. So something we're also looking in as the show, we need, as Mike was saying, we want a cohesive team that ties with their bond. We want to be able to see people that have, you don't have to be wrestling characters, but you guys have to be identifiable as, yeah, exactly, as a unit, as a whole team and a robot that everybody can sort of point at and go, that's King Chaos. We know who they are. We can always see them. They resemble their bot, and the two go together. And look at Charles, cat ears, blue, goes right along. You should probably uncover that, actually.
That is true.
So,
You also caught me the one day I actually went like incognito.
He was actually dressed as overalls.
I guess I can never really go incognito.
so forming an interesting team is also important to us. People that can talk to camera, that's important to us. Being able to be comfortable in front of that camera.
Just to make this point, for the most part, engineers are not good at talking to the camera.
No.
This is a skill that you either have to develop under fire, or you put someone on your team who can do this. You do not want the person representing your team on camera to be staring dead-eyed into the camera, talking in a monotone voice, because that will either creep people out or make them ignore you. And those aren't the results you want.
I mean, we all have to accept that most of us bot builders are a little on the spectrum somewhere. Everybody's got little social issues here and there. Yes. Have to overcome them. You could join an existing team. You could find other teams that might be in your area that you could help with. That's a great way to sort of get started if it's totally new to you and you've never done it.
The nice thing there is there are teams all over the country, because this isn't just a sport that's on television. There are fighting robot events on the West Coast, on the East Coast, in Florida, in the Northeast, and all over the world really at this point. There's events in China, Russia, Brazil, the UK, the Netherlands, Germany. You can basically throw a dart at a map, and unless you hit the ocean, you're probably going to be within a few hundred miles of an event. And most of them could use a hand.
Yeah. Usually a lot of teams could definitely use a hand.
And that's one thing to think about is if you're going to try to join a team, think about the skills you have. It may not be design, it may not be fabrication, but what background you've got that can contribute to the team. Because for the most part, everyone on the team is going to be exhausted by the end of the build. An extra hand to help out with either the heavy lifting in the literal or metaphorical sense can be huge. And the nice thing with an established team is we already have gone through all of the nasty paperwork side of this, so we know what needs to happen. And that's a whole other can of worms to deal with.
Then you also got to design a really good bot. That's crucial. You can't sort of just show up with a cardboard box that's got some wheels on it. You actually got to produce something that's going to survive. Well, that's a different kind of bot. It's a fun bot.
So this is actually some stuff that hasn't really been made majorly public in the past. This is the design process that led to Bombshell for season 2. And probably a year before the filming, I started working on some initial CAD concepts, and on the top right you can see one of the early versions of that big horizontal spinning bar that we used against Cobalt and Tombstone that season, where it was actually a fairly boxy chassis. There was a couple little interesting things about it, but it was still kind of boring looking. So after some back and forth with Greg, and I think Peter was involved in a few of those conversations at that point as well, I got some feedback on what they were really looking for, and then the second chassis design started to come out of that, which is where you've got these individual wheel pods that bolt up to the central section. It's got a little bit more 3D geometry to the design. And that was okay, but still not quite there. That led to the image on the bottom right, where this chassis is now, the pods are a single piece, but we've completely flipped around where some of the wheels are. We've added a lot more shape to the sides of it. It's not a rectangle anymore. And that gave it a really unique identity on the show, because nobody else was doing that. You never really see a fighting robot in the arena where the wheels are massively offset from each other. And it's not really a performance hindrance, because that's something you think is, well, it's going to make it turn terribly or something. No, it actually helps a lot in the arena with that setup, because it made driving in a straight line a lot easier. And you'd be surprised, driving robots in the arena, how hard it is to drive in a straight line a lot of the time. Admittedly, if you've watched some events, you've probably realized a lot of people have a lot of trouble driving in any kind of direction with any real intent.
Yes.
So taking your initial concept and refining it, and just applying that extra layer of how do I make it look that much cooler can take it from a plain metal box with a weapon into something that's really going to show up on camera and make an impression.
So one thing I want to also say is during the design of this, I have no idea how Mike, Jerome, or Al Kindle knew that I was now sort of a producer on the show, because they were all sending me their CAD. And everybody was going, check out this is what I'm working on, what do you think, what do you think? And I have no idea how they knew I was already sort of like being part of the selection committee of what robots were going to come. But that was a good way for me to have a better understanding of what was happening with the design process and what the thought process was. It wasn't like 2 days before the due date, here's an application that just shows up and it doesn't have a bunch of technical requirements, and I have no understanding of what they've done with this robot.
One other thing I want to get on here is if you're trying something that's genuinely new or different, if you can build a prototype during the application period and show that prototype working, that will put you miles ahead of every other team.
Yes.
There have been robots that have been submitted in the past where they're trying something super cool, but they don't have any way of showing that they even have remotely the capability of making it happen. And it's really hard for BattleBots to justify bringing your team out to California and slotting you in on a TV show with a really limited number of slots if they're not confident that you can actually make something happen.
A great example of that, if you've been watching the latest season, you've seen the robot Huge. So he was sending me all these videos of a 30-pounder that he had made, and also I think he made a 3-pounder or a 1-pounder.
There's a 3-pounder.
And proving out the concept of this shape of robot, which was, when you first look at it, you go, that's not going to work. But it was working. It was working great at those scales. So it's like, okay, let's see what this does. And Huge was an amazing thing to show up at this last season.
You could not have a huge fight during the filming of BattleBots without the entire pits erupting in
Definitely the builders.
Yeah.
It was blast.
And then eventually I think even kind of found its way into the crowd over the course of filming, because I think they could hear the pits because it was just that loud.
So bot designs that become important is obviously your survivability is crucial. Can you make beyond 3, beyond 6 rounds? Maybe. There's a tough beating to be taken out there in that arena. Is your robot going to be controllable through the whole thing and put on that good fight? Because in the end, that's what it's about. Is you can come in and do a show and put on something, but you still got to fight. I'm not pointing any fingers. So, you know, you got to be able to make a robot that's going to survive the brutality that goes on there.
One thing to keep in mind is with the format for this season, you had 4 ranking fights, and then if you managed to make it out of those 4 fights, you were in the round of 16. And that's 4 more fights to actually win the title. So you had 8 fights potentially before you were done, if you managed to survive that long. And then you had things like the Desperado tournament where that could add another 3 fights. So the ability to not only build the robot, but make sure it was durable enough that you weren't killing yourself in the pits trying to keep it working was critical.
As Matt Maxim of Sewer Snake has always said, it's one of the pits. That's where you win your fight. Robots need to look cool. That's incredibly important to a television show. We have to have something that's dynamic. We have to have things that stand out. Things that you would think of going, wow, I want a toy of that. Squared, right-angled aluminum boxes do not sell television. They don't. Shh. Shh. Quiet. But these kind of robots, this is starting to look cool. This is in the right direction. This is the kind of thing that we want to see out there in that arena. And yeah, I mean,
Is that helicopter?
no, Hellchopper's not in this one. But I have a photo, and I was thinking about it. To make this up. No.
We're good.
What? What's that one that does this thing? Did I put that in there? You make a great robot. I love your robot. So
It's actually a razor.
no, it's not.
Oh my God,
It's
razor
your own.
is
It's
half
coyote.
whatever.
It's great. And then, of course, You have a totally cool robot.
So, and actually, this is kind of an illustration that it doesn't necessarily have to be a super complex shape to have little aesthetic flares that make it stand out. Like, if we hadn't put those teeth on the front of the robot, it'd just be this giant green plane of nothing.
And it looked weird before they were on.
Yeah, it looked really not good until the teeth were in place.
I mean, all of the angles and the shapes you guys put in are beautiful.
Oh, and if you look at the top armor, there's no reason for those bulges on the top armor beyond that we wanted to put something there to add more shape to it. And that was, it may have added half a pound to the weight of the robot, but it really made a difference in how it looks in the arena.
Can we expect similar aesthetic improvements in Algos now?
Algos is retired and it will stay retired.
Build a robot that's original. We love to see new robots, like Huge. Huge shows up, totally original. Chomp. Chomp for a full rotating hammer. Never been done other than by Chomp.
We don't put Huge in this, but a white robot on a white background doesn't really work.
You know, Rex, a walking, gyroscopically driven robot. It was great. It's crazy, but great. Of course, the ultimate original, ultimate cool robot.
Bring it back, Mark. I know you still have it.
Can I quote you on this?
Maybe drinks in it.
So, clones are cool in Star Wars, but not cool in BattleBots. We do not want to see 13 tombstones and 8 gigabytes show up and 4 minotaurs. That doesn't make good
What you're
content.
saying is you don't want a bunch of two-wheel drive wedged vertical discs to show up?
Yeah, there were only like 20 of them this season.
How many invaders do you want?
It really depends on whether or not they actually turn off at the end of the
That's
fight.
the thing. Yeah, the shut off at the end would be great. The biggest challenge, actually building the bot.
Can't confirm, it is hard.
I think there's a few other people here that could all say that.
So one thing I will say is if you want to actually get on the show and fight robots on television, start building smaller robots now. Everything the Chaos Corps learned that we put into Bombshell, we learned building at a smaller scale. Outside of a couple people on our team who've actually done bigger robots in the past, but that was a decade prior technology. So there's still a lot of relearning that has to happen to stay up to date with the current batteries and motors and motor controllers and all of that. A lot of what you can do at the 12 and 30 pound scale, which we run here at DragonCon, can actually scale up to a heavyweight with a bit of thought and a bit of care. Plan for delays on your build. Everyone can make a schedule. Very few people can stick to it, especially once your schedule is dependent on more than just you.
This is not just for robots. This is life. Plan for delays.
And then along those same lines, plan for the skills and tools you actually have available. No matter how cool the thing you design is, if you can't make it, it's kind of a waste of your time. Figure out what kind of gear you can actually get and what you can make yourself. The first Bombshell was designed mostly around water jet cutting because we were able to get access to a water jet cutter. The stuff that wasn't water jet cut was mostly laser cut because we found a vendor that was doing laser cutting for relatively cheap. And that was most of how the entire robot went together. And then, we've hammered on this a bit already, make spares of everything.
As we said, it's one in the pits. The ability to turn around and get your robot back up and running. Even if you won the match in the first 30 seconds, there's so much physics that go on your robot of damage that's usually taken.
Winning a match against Bronco isn't necessarily winning, because everything in your robot is still broken.
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
for season 2 of BattleBots, we made it all the way to the finals of Bombshell. In the finals, we were also on the last of most of our spares. One of the questions I kept getting was, well, why didn't you just bring Bombshell back for season 3? We couldn't. There was nothing left worth using. Everything was broken. That's partly Ray's fault, partly a few other people, but yeah, everything was broken.
Thanks.
We had to build a new robot from the ground up no matter what we were doing. There was nothing left worth using. outside of maybe like the power switches.
Is there a typical dimensional, like 3 to 4 by 4 size?
Good, it's not our batch.
It's quite possibly one of the best photos from the season 3, in my mind.
If you're trying to hit like an average 250-pound robot size, like a 2-foot square for the wheelbase is probably not too far off. But you get robots that are really tiny, you get robots that are ridiculously massive. You get huge robots. You get things like Warhead, which is this ridiculous contraption that's amazing and beautiful and works well, and the actual core functionality of it is really dense with a lot of large attachments on it that really make it look way bigger than it is.
I would actually say that overall is right about the middle of size.
Yeah, overall's pretty close to median size for a fighting robot at that weight class.
I don't know how tangible weight is.
Everybody's attempting to stay roughly at 250 because the physics are in your favor, right? You want to be right there. You don't want to be pushed around. If somebody's got a 250-pound bot, you have a 200-pound bot, who do you think is going to win the shoving match?
Does anybody use the Tesla coil like zapping their chunk?
Not allowed. Not allowed. No EMF. We'll get to questions.
All right, okay.
So as far as the weight side of it goes, most BattleBot entries, unless you've got a mini bot that's part of it or have a heavily modular configuration, are somewhere between 240 and 255 pounds when you pull it out of the crate. And by the time we get it back into the arena, we've had enough holes added to it that it's now 250 at the most.
And with this last slide, one of the things that once you build that bot that cannot be stressed enough is drive. Don't drive it for the first time in the arena. It is not a good experience. Drive it out on the street, drive it wherever you can, drive it on every texture you can. Learn what that robot does. Be so familiar with how it performs when you move on the stick. It makes the world of difference.
Yeah. There's nothing that can directly substitute for driving in an arena, but getting as used to what it's going to do as possible when you're driving it in whatever environment you can get it into is going to help.
Oh, the sad part of the talk, money. So, how much does this crap cost? A lot. But, you know, you sort of need to make a budget. You kind of need to figure out, how much am I going to spend? How much do motors cost? How much do the new speed motors cost? Do I want to go brushless? Do I want to go brushed? What are the price ranges I'm looking at? This is a big driving factor also to design. You may have to adjust your design based on what you are willing to spend to be able to buy the motor or the size of the motor you're thinking of speccing.
And beyond all that, there's kind of this trade-off. You have a monetary budget and then you've got a time budget. And there's a lot of components where you can either spend time or you can spend money on it. The tough part with BattleBots is you typically only have so much time budget available. So you've got to figure out this balancing act of, all right, where am I going to get the best value out of outsourcing parts or building it myself? And then how do you actually turn something into a final working product? So if you're trying to get like a typical price for a heavyweight BattleBot entry, there isn't one. Most of them hit somewhere between, I'd say, $5,000 and $20,000. There's people who have blown well beyond that, and there's some robots that are below that. One really great example of a very low budget build that actually did great on the show is Sharkoprian. And that thing was built out of propane tanks with wheelchair motors and basically scavenged together. And it put on a great show. And if you've got the time and the know-how to make that sort of thing happen, you don't need to spend a ton of money. I think he spent, what, maybe $3,000 to build that thing? And that even might be over. That's if he bought a lot of the stuff new.
Cannibalize many pieces out of it. So of course, how are you going to pay for it? Are you independently wealthy? Did your parents leave you a big chunk of change? Did you invest in Apple a long time ago, ready to sell? So, or are you just going to max out your credit cards, go deep into debt? Hey! Or of course, find a sponsor or multiple sponsors.
So prior to finding a very generous sponsor, the Chaos Corps, one of the ideas when we formed is there's 10 of us. That means per person, we're not maxing out nearly as many credit cards.
Well, yours are going to have more cards, it's not as much.
Well, each person is maxing out as many cards.
That's a whole other
Yeah,
topic.
that
was
is
sort
the
of
downside of a large team is the logistics get that much sketchier. Because at least the last couple seasons, there's been a small travel stipend and 2 hotel rooms. Unless you feel like simulating Dragon Con for 2.5 weeks, cramming 10 people into 2 hotel rooms can get a little too old. So, sponsorship is by far the best way to handle this. Either going out and getting sponsors that are actually making and selling the parts you want to use, or going and finding companies that want to support the team, even if they're not necessarily directly related. In the Chaos Corps case, we actually had a company called SendGrid, who someone on our team had a contact with them, and we were able to build this relationship with them, and now they are the Chaos Corps' exclusive sponsor. And that's been a wonderful relationship. I've gone to Denver, Colorado, which is where their headquarters is, and supported hackathons, and we've done a lot of stuff with them at various events, and even doing like Google Hangouts with robotics clubs that they've sponsored, things like that. So almost every team wants sponsors. There's probably 1 or 2 out there that don't, but for the most part, everyone wants sponsorship. And it can be money, services, parts, whatever you can put together. The nice thing is, in the transition from ABC to Discovery, the sponsorship rules have gotten a lot friendlier to the teams. They were pretty onerous on the ABC side. We couldn't do a whole lot for our sponsors on ABC. On Discovery, we've got logos on the robots. We've got a lot more.
Logos on your clothes.
Yeah, we've got logos on
the lower
uniforms.
third that they comes up underneath the team shots.
It's a much better deal for everyone involved. And the big thing is, any company that you're going to try to get as a sponsor can't compete with the advertisers that are already on the network. So you're not going to get Home Depot as a sponsor.
You're not going to get Bud as a sponsor.
That's just not going to happen. That's the nature of how these rules work. But it's referred to as a local sponsor, but it doesn't need to be local to you. It just needs to not be a national advertising company that instead of buying ad space on the network is now just getting 3 minutes of airtime on your robot.
30 seconds of commercial.
Yes. So when you're going to approach a sponsor, there's a couple things that are going to be critical. What can you actually do for them? I mentioned earlier, I've gone to hackathons that were sponsored by the company that sponsored us at SendGrid. We've done Google Hangouts where I'm calling in live over a webcam, and we've shipped the robot up for events they've done and had it on display. How you actually get in contact with this company is going to be important. Sending a blast of emails out to everyone you can think of, you might get a hit or 2. If you can find someone that you know who knows someone at the company, that's getting past several different gates of, yeah, whatever, this is spam, I'm just going to ignore it. And the most critical thing, do not overpromise what you're going to do for your sponsors. For the Chaos Corps, what we promised SendGrid is in exchange for the support they gave us, we would do everything we could to make sure we had a fight get on television. We did not promise that we would have a single fight aired. We did not promise how long the fight would be, how well we would do, anything like that. We promised we would do everything within our power during the event to make sure we got a fight on television. And some of the decisions we made on the build were part of that. So if you saw our first fight against Complete Control, we went with the axe weapon and our drone. And part of the thought there is we wanted to make sure this fight made television, and there were not a lot of drones, and that was something that would make production really happy. Whether or not the drone survived or did anything, that was less relevant. The fact that there was a drone in the arena actually fighting was what made sure that fight would get on television. Then we actually went out there and put on a good fight, which sealed the deal. And then, which says a lot because he was the pilot. So there's a great company who I will say my wife works for them, so I am a little biased. But Big Blue Saw actually has a whole write-up on how to get sponsorship from their perspective. And they do know what they're talking about. They sponsor Bike Force, which is Paul Ventimiglia's robot that won Season 1 of BattleBots. So they know what they're talking about from that perspective, and that will give you some great insights into how you should approach a company that you're trying to get to sponsor or build, because you're asking these people to potentially put out thousands and thousands of dollars in either parts or just straight up cash for you to make something cool in your garage and have it blow up on television. Figuring out how to sell that to them is important.
So you finally got to apply. You actually got to go fill out the form on the webpage and start the process.
All your team info, all your personal info that needs to be up there. Most important to, at least to me, coming from sort of a safety, mechanical, electrical side, is I want to see really good documentation of what is in your robot. Wiring diagrams, CAD models that are opened up. These, I can't stress how important this stuff is for our selection. Because if we don't see some of this, we don't know if you are capable. If we see a very nice drawing like this, we realize you actually understand your robot. You will know what's going on in your robot. If you just say, well, I'm building a box, and you're going to show up with a thing at the end, we've never really seen what goes on in the middle, safety's not going to be really too happy about that. We don't know how much to trust you and what your capabilities are. It's very important for us to be able to trust the builders in their skills and qualifications.
It doesn't have to be like the drawing you're seeing here where it's actually the CAD file with everything, you know, bill of materials and all that. But it has to have enough information to convey the idea that you know what you're doing, and anyone who looks at it who's at least reasonably knowledgeable about fighting robots can figure out the basic idea. So we're showing our motor controller locations, our battery locations, our motor locations, what kind of armor panels we're doing, where the different materials are used, and where our power switches are. And that's basically just us demonstrating we do know what we're doing, and we can make this actually exist. And this was a bit lazy, but this is, the other part of it is you have to show a wiring schematic. And this is plenty to get across the idea that you know how this is going to work. Because this is showing...
Just so you know, this could also have been done in pencil. You could have just, but the concept of what this diagram is really important because it means you have a grasp of how the electrical system works. And you have a good enough grasp that you can explain it to somebody else and let us know just how your system is going to function.
If you look at this and just take a moment to take it in, you can basically figure out exactly how Bombshell works because it's all fairly straightforward things. We've got weapon switches, we've got batteries, we've got motors, we've got speed controllers, and this is just showing the flow of how those all hook together. It doesn't need to be fancy to get the idea across. And then this wasn't part of the Season 3 applications because it was a mad rush once the contract was signed to make this happen. I think it was officially signed end of January, and word that the Discovery deal got out got out early February. We had to ship these robots before the end of March. So that was application process, you're accepted, build the thing, put it in a crate, send it to California.
I had no control of that, but I'm still sorry. I apologize profusely for this.
No, you're not. You say this.
I am actually very sorry.
So while it wasn't a part of Season 3, this was a part of Season 2, and I think at least to some degree Season 1.
Yeah.
And the goal is to have the application video be a part of future seasons as well. And the core goal of the application video isn't showing your robot design skills, but showing that your team can actually be a decent presence on television. So, this is our video from Season 2.
Hi, I'm Simon Arthur, and I'm here to introduce the Chaos Board BattleBots. Why don't you tell us who you are?
I'm Mike Jeffries. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've been building and competing in robot combat events for over a decade.
Why why are you interested in building a robot for BattleBots?
For me, BattleBots is kind of the childhood dream. I was in middle school when BattleBots first made waves in the robot combat world. I went to some of the early events in the crowd and decided this is something I really wanted to do. And for the past decade, I've been building and working towards that goal.
How long have you been building robots?
My first successful build was in 2006. There were several years of things not quite working before that. But since 2006, I've been building machines, and at this point, I've built over 20 combat robots ranging from 150 grams to 60 pounds.
Now, what motivates your designs, and in particular this current design?
So for me, the biggest thing is I want to find that balance between the aesthetics of the machine and the function. It's not enough that it works well. It has to look good while it's doing it. There's no point in the dull gray box breaking the opponent if you can make it something that really engages the people in the crowd. Because as much as robot combat is a competition, it's also for the spectators. You want to make it fun and exciting for the people watching.
What robot builders do you fear the most?
There really aren't any builders that I fear. There's some I respect, but fear isn't a part of the question. If you go into a fight afraid of who you're fighting, you're going to lose. And you can't have that fear.
How did you meet the Chaos Corps? How did they get together?
The Chaos Corps is a group of builders in the southeast of the U.S. who've been coming up with these crazy contraptions that just beat the crud out of each other for the audience's amusement. We decided to band together to create something bigger than any of us had built before. Beyond me, we've got Simon Arthur.
That's me!
The voice of the Chaos Corps, a BattleBots veteran, the owner and operator of Big Blue Saw. He's got the voice and face for radio. We've got Dan Hammer, our percussive engineer, whose contemplative building style makes all of us look a little bit chaotic. We've got Randy, our bot medic, the man who will rush towards disaster while everyone else is fleeing.
That's the speed controller. She's gone.
We've also got my wife, Julie Samancic, who told me I need to be assertive for this interview.
We were supposed to go to dinner a half hour ago.
We've got Jamie Price, a BattleBots veteran and our Minister of Misinformation.
My philosophy when building fighting robots is that they should be extremely violent, but should look extremely good doing it.
We also have Matt Sparky Carroll, our resident welder, and Brandon Davis, a minion who we fed and has yet to leave.
Dudes, I got beans!
We've got Dale Hetherington, our electromechanical mastermind and mad scientist. We have Jason Evil Brown, commander of the air wing of the team. We've also got Chris Williamson, a BattleBots veteran, the owner of KTetch, who is our director of alien technology.
I'm Simon Arthur, and this is the Chaos Corps. We'll see you in the BattleBots at Season 2.0.
Don't get ready to be a little slow.
Yeah, so with these application videos, having some fun with it can make a huge difference. I've seen a lot of the application videos that have been submitted, partly because a lot of teams can't follow instructions. So we were told to upload the videos to YouTube and set them as private and then put the links in the registration form. The number of teams that publicly uploaded it that Reddit then found and posted was pretty hilarious. So try to follow instructions, but the whole thing about staring directly into the camera and talking in a monotone voice happened in several of them.
More than several. Many.
Those are my favorite videos, just like three skinny guys like standing in front of the camera in a row, just all monotone. Guys, come on.
When in doubt, tase someone.
Yeah.
So to fill in that bit, we've been filming segments of our application video and the taser was just in the background of a couple of shots, none of which I think actually made it into the video. But we decided we had this build-up of the taser in the background. And we had to do something with it. So we decided, all right, I'm kind of the one talking to everything, so we're gonna do some bit where I actually get zapped with a stun gun. It didn't hurt as much as you think.
So we couldn't find a 9-volt battery either, so we found a 9-volt eliminator, and it was actually on a
So it was plugged into the wall.
Nice. So something else that's really important is 1 year on after you've made the team, you've made a robot, you've done some fighting, is also broadcasting about that, telling people about what you're doing. The social media aspect is huge for getting everybody to pay attention to what's going on out there. Not everybody watches Discovery, but many people follow Twitter, and they find things on Twitter that then drives them back to Discovery.
And the nice thing is, even beyond that, BattleBots, the current season, is available on Amazon. There's ways to get it that all help ensure future seasons. And making sure people know about this is the big job of the team once filming's over. So once you're actually in, you want to have a team page on Facebook, you want to have a team Twitter account, you want to be able to interact with people. One thing we've been doing the last couple seasons is actually, if you're familiar with Reddit, they do a thing called Ask Me Anything, where either a person or a group of people will post and then reply to whatever strange questions get asked for the next several hours.
No, there's no strange questions on Reddit.
I think the current trend is asking what Will Bale smells like.
I don't know if that's strange.
Yeah, coconut and sunscreen. And then there's also an official BattleBots Facebook group where a lot of the fans are going to be going and occasionally asking the same question for the 50th time. But having the teams there who can actually come in and talk to these people who are really into the sport is that little bit of difference that may keep them as a fan for the next decade, as opposed to them going, all right, what's the next new shiny thing?
Isn't that right, Peter?
What are you saying? What do you want? What do you want out of me? So the last of all, you know, you built the robot, you've applied, you're now going to be on, prove what your robot can do. Show us what you can bring. You know, fight in that arena, become a champion like these people. Find us.
Okay, as we were saying with social media, these are where you can find us on social media. At this point, I think we'll open it up to questions.
Anyone? Bueller?
What's the time frame in which the whole season is filmed?
So season 3, or Discovery season, that we just shot, we did in 17 days, I think. It was pretty long. It was way too long. Earlier ones were like 14 days. I think we did it in 2 weeks prior to that.
So I think season 2 on ABC, we basically got in Friday and then filmed throughout the following week and finished that Sunday.
Yeah,
So it's just over a full week.
A week and 2 weekend end caps.
That was great.
Manageable.
That was
And
good.
back in the old Comedy Central days, we used to shoot the whole thing in about 5 days with 500 robots. It's insane.
How far in advance do the teams know the dates of filming?
Yeah.
Usually the answer to that question is you'll know next week.
Next week.
So I think with this season, there was a little bit of up in the air issues with the dates until probably a month and a half out from filming.
Yeah, it was. Greg does not want to sort of like, yeah, we're going to do it this week and have it not happen, and then say it again, we're going to do it this week and have it not happen.
Or is it next
So
week?
it's the hold in. So it's.
And realistically, the goal, when it's not this mad rush because the TV contract just got signed and the network is demanding that the show be ready for this air date, which means we can't film any later than 2 months from now, is that the teams will know when filming is going to be when the applications are going out.
So just so you guys understand, season 3, contract negotiations started in October. The contract was signed January 22nd. That's how long it took to get BattleBots, Whale Rock, and Discovery all on the same piece of paper. I mean, that's just. I mean, that's why.
Business.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then they come and say, okay, that's great, because back when we wrote a contract, you had, well, we would fit this shooting schedule for you. And then that negotiation kept creeping up, and then finally they signed the contract. It's like, well, yeah, you still have to fit this shooting schedule. And then it's like, okay, hey guys, you got 6 weeks, go. Ready? I apologize.
No, we're
Again,
gonna do it anyway, though.
And this is why it was probably a really bad idea to have the builders party late week 2, because I think the hotel's probably never letting us back.
Probably not.
You know, we
And it's mostly his fault.
Hotel and that, I had nothing to do with it.
You reenacting Led Zeppelin tours or something, throwing televisions out the window?
Chain gun probably.
Topiaries.
Tell us frown on chain guns.
The moment it all went to shit was when the first little potted plant flew through the air.
Blame the Dutch.
Hey,
Before I fired the chain gun, I handed it.
I think we are officially going to blame the Dutch on this one, because I think they did throw the first potted plant.
they did.
You guys
Greg and I
did
didn't
something
help.
amazing that day.
Alright, I think I saw a question over here.
Where do you guys get parts for bots, like electronics and stuff?
So there's a lot of great vendors. Most of them are online at this point. You've got companies like Magmotor, which is a Byte4 sponsor. You've got Big Blue Saw as a great resource for getting actual parts made.
Robot Combat.
Robot Marketplace.
Yeah, Robot Marketplace.
That's a company that's run by Jim Spentowski from the Nightmare team, which is one of the major distributors for robot parts across the entire weight spectrum. And that's a really good go-to resource. There's companies like Ampflow, which sells motors. Hobby King is actually a surprisingly good resource for a lot of parts. In the case of Bombshell, we've been using batteries from Hobby King both seasons and have had 0 issues with them. They're actually pretty cheap as far as that scale of component is. There's really nice batteries. Max Amp has been a great sponsor of a lot of teams with their really high-end battery systems.
MasterCard for hardware. MasterCard can be a little more expensive than most things, but it's to you usually the next day.
The other beautiful thing with MasterCard, both here in Atlanta and then out where we were filming in Long Beach, is there's a warehouse within driving distance. So during these 16 days we were on set filming BattleBots this last season, there were shuttles of builders going to McMaster to pick up parts for the day that were then going to the arena, and people were building bots out of whatever we could get at McMaster.
I live in San Diego and I've gotten orders within 8 hours.
Mike, if you want to list these resources, I have my old Maker's Guide PDFs online. If you come poke me after this is done, I'll link you to them.
There's
Everything that they said is
quite a few people like Charles and a lot of other have made great building guides that are out there, sort of giving huge lists of just links. Here's where you get wheels. Here's where you get motors. Thankfully, there are people like Charles that write stuff up like that.
Charles isn't just writing stuff up like that. He actually makes parts too.
Yeah.
So
And he tests pretty much everything.
Bombshell in season 2 was running his motor controllers, and
about a third of the field in season 3 was running my gear in some way. That was terrifying.
there's one point where Charles is accidentally running one of our set screws, but that's kind of a different issue.
Yes?
What's your PNC controller of choice? Or make something more robust?
So for a lot of the teams, we're actually using hobby radio gear that you can go buy at a store. With Bombshell, I run a Spectrum DX6i as the main transmitter, and the Spectrum radio receivers are fine, but they're also really expensive. So what I do is I buy these cheap, they're called Orange RXs from Hobby King, and you'll get a dead one every now and again, but they work just as well as the Spectrums if they're not dead on arrival, and they're like 10 bucks a piece. So if they get set on fire, you don't really care that much. And that little PWM receiver, hooks up to all of the commercial speed controllers you can get, and it's a really direct interface to drive your robot. And then you've also got things where you can either go that route or you can go into complete custom control systems. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. I know the Bronco guys use a semi-custom system from Vex Robotics that's a little fancier. I think they've got some telemetry systems and things like that built into it. But you can start with super cheap, super simple radio gear that'll work and go all the way into these crazy custom solutions that will give you every bit of information you could possibly want out of your robot. Whether or not you can do anything with it's a whole different story, but it'll at least tell you what's going on.
Leanne, you had a question? Don't mind.
Did you
maintain ownership of the likeness of your bot, or do you have to sign that over to the
I'm not entirely sure how exactly it's structured, but basically BattleBots has the rights to use our robot's likeness however they like. But we're also entitled to a cut of royalties and things for if there's a toy deal or merchandising or t-shirts or things where our robot's featured on it.
So there's a cut they get. So
Yeah, that's a pretty good deal.
BattleBots in
I've
essence
seen-
is licensing the likeness for
5 years?
Yeah.
That seems right.
It's a 5-year period where basically you can't take your BattleBots robot, which brings a lot of prestige with the robot itself, and take it to Robot Wars or take it to King of Bots in China under that same branding, because there's value that being on BattleBots is added to the robot. So there's kind of this shared benefit. And technically you could actually take a robot from BattleBots and go compete elsewhere. But what you have to do is say, hey, I want to go do this. Are you okay with that? And if they say yes, then you can go do it. And then from a practical standpoint, if you look at robots like Gigabyte, who looks shockingly like Megabyte on a different show, who looks shockingly like Invader from season 2 for that 40-minute spin down.
Little paint job.
So the way the contract's set up, it's a lot of scary legalese, but actually talk to the people in charge of the decisions and they're generally not going to give you problems. It's very much, we're all friends, we're all essentially a family at these events, and we don't want to screw each other over.
So, these, obviously we couldn't start at like a 250-pound level.
No,
Do not.
No.
It's a terrible decision.
1 pound, 3 pounds, 30 pounds.
He's actually
Great.
We do RC cars, we race and so we're
Halfway
familiar
there.
with electronics. He's far outpacing my knowledge, and he's even 3D printed a small bot already. But is there some place that we can go and learn from a small scale? There are groups in Atlanta that we can be a part of.
So since you're in the Atlanta area, you're actually kind of lucky in that respect. So Robot Battles is a regional group that puts on events at MomoCon and DragonCon every year. And that's basically where all of the local builders bring their smaller robots out to play. So at DragonCon, Sundays we run 1 and 3 pound robots in an enclosed arena. And then on Monday we run 12 and 30 pound robots on an open stage. We do a similar setup at MomoCon, except the days are shifted because MomoCon doesn't go into Monday. But even if you don't have a robot to compete with at these events, showing up and talking to the builders and building those initial relationships.
Watching an event.
Yeah, go to an event, talk to the people in the pits. For the most part, everyone's really friendly and happy to show you everything they've done. There are very few people I've ever run into in the over decade I've been doing this sport who aren't happy to show you exactly how they figured out how to do this weird thing. Because most people are really proud of what they've done and want to show it off. And there's nothing that can substitute actually being at an event for seeing what you need to know to do this.
Do you guys know about the events tomorrow in London? Yeah. So tomorrow at 10 at the International night.
There's also the
Yeah, the HRC.
the ranking registrar.
Yep. Botlanta.org.
They helped me start like over 15 years ago at this point.
Maybe at least once a month. They're more focused in actual robots instead of glorified RC cars that smash each other. But there's a lot of robots. So if you guys are already into RC, you're halfway there to just building a combat robot.
Another thing worth adding into that is it's not going to be combat robot specific, but for everyone, look in your area for maker spaces, because that is an incredible resource for both knowledge and training to learn how to actually do all the stuff you want to learn how to do to build a robot. There's going to be people who know how to weld, there's going to be people who know to know woodworking, which actually is surprisingly applicable because a lot of the plastics we use in fighting robots behave pretty similarly to some types of woods. So you can take a lot of the knowledge you get from learning woodworking, apply it to things like the UHMW plastic you see Huge made out of, Huge's wheels at least. And all of this stuff can add into that knowledge base that turns into your eventual robot.
Do you want to know what I was going to talk about?
I want to know when the next season, if there's a next season is.
So,
Went there.
this was coming. We all knew it. Greg called me 2 days ago and said, next week, Greg, Trey, Tom Gutteridge, Aaron, and Chris are all flying to New York to go have a long conversation with Discovery about moving forward. That's as best as he said he could give. There is no, because the fact they said, we want you to come out and we want to talk, meant something. More so than, oh yeah, I don't know, we may fill that slot with baking. They actually are interested. Now, what that contract ends up being, how long that takes, I have no knowledge. But Greg was positive.
So what you're saying is they aren't going to do a Naked and Afraid BattleBots spinoff.
Well, there was that one.
One time, yeah. Look, that wasn't me.
So every year you have to negotiate.
So let me say something, because I think that there's things I can say that you probably can't or shouldn't.
Sure, go for it.
So TV is irritating.
No.
And I think one of the big goals BattleBots has, and I'm saying this as me thinking it from just general impressions, is this first season on Discovery was the chance to prove that it's something that could be long-term. And I suspect the goal is the next renewal, it might only be one more season. But the goal is to get multiple seasons renewed at once. That way we can plan more than a year in advance. Because the toughest part for all of this is, once that deal's signed, if it's just for that one season, everything needs to happen now, and it needs to happen at a pace that is just ludicrous. But if you can sign a deal that says, we're going to do 3 more seasons of this show, we're going to film it in April every year, you can actually start building this infrastructure that makes everything that much easier for all of the teams and all of the people supporting the show behind the scenes that you never actually do get to see. And there is a huge, huge crew behind the scenes that's never on camera that makes all of this possible.
So things that are good signs about why we may come back is Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery already, is bought up showing Robot Wars. You think, why the hell are we going to show Robot Wars right after a BattleBots episode? Want that to loop the thing. Well, they bought up Robot Wars because that means some other network can't show it. Which means they care more about BattleBots and not having competition with the BattleBots. That's what they're trying for. So they do want something. They do like what's going on. It's just, now it's going to be the wonderful land of contract negotiations again. I apologize, that's not anything I can do anymore.
How did BattleBots do in the ratings?
In the beginning, we did amazing. We did some really good, like first 3 episodes.
So the numbers are really tough to quantify for a couple of reasons. One is cable ratings are just a little bit more finicky in general. Early on, we were getting about 1 million viewers per episode. There was staying somewhere in the 900,000 to 1 million range for most of the season. We had the 2-week Shark Week break. It dropped, I think, right around 800,000-ish, and it's been slowly climbing back up since then. But that only captures a tiny chunk of what's actually going on, or not a tiny chunk, but a small chunk of what's going on. Because that may not necessarily get anyone who's watching it more than a couple days after on DVR or on-demand services. And all of these episodes are being made available on Discovery streaming site, on Side Channel streaming site, through Amazon. And all of that audience, especially when it's streamed through their sites, they've probably got metrics there too. And they're selling advertisement there. So we're seeing a chunk of what they're actually getting audience-wise. One of the things I've been hearing pretty regularly is that the Science Channel numbers are pretty phenomenal considering they're essentially reruns. And those ratings don't actually get reported out because as far as like the cable rating agencies are concerned, it's a rerun. And they don't report that publicly. But I guarantee you Science Channel knows exactly what that number is.
So BattleBots is available on Amazon for people, some of the cord cutters and stuff. You can buy the whole season. I was curious as to whether Discovery sold that to Amazon or...
I don't know how that deal worked out.
I'm just curious as to...
I'd be stunned if Discovery wasn't getting that.
Oh, well, yeah. So, I didn't know if they were the ones in control
Probably.
of that.
I'm assuming so.
with those guys.
Well run.
Yeah.
With Atlanta becoming more like the east coast of Hollywood, would they ever consider moving the production?
Come on.
There has been some heavy lobbying, at least on the part of our team, to move filming to the Atlanta area. One of the things I've actually suggested, I don't know if it'll ever happen, is I know it's been stated as a goal from Greg that he wants to, if things continue to grow and expand to the point where the current way of doing things doesn't make a lot of sense, to have regional events that are essentially qualifiers for the show. And I think if something like that were to happen, you'd see Atlanta as one of the major hubs for that, because it's so easy for everyone anywhere within 1,000 miles to get here. And you know, that's, I think, a situation where you could potentially see it happen.
If someone just wants to be a part-time helper, how much time commitment would you want to see out of them?
All of it. All of your time.
So the weird thing with BattleBots right now is it's a lot of prep and then a marathon and then nothing for a while. Mostly because it's kind of like a hangover at that point where you just don't want to touch a wrench for a couple weeks. But realistically, any teams that you're near, that you're willing to help out, will take any help you're willing to give them happily. If you can contribute to whatever they're doing in any way, they're going to like that. That said, having the presence of mind to recognize when you need to step back because they know what they're doing, that's going to be important. So if you want to get involved in a team in that way, what I'd say is start talking to whoever's local to you now and start building that relationship. Because even if you're not able to be there and helping out all the time, if they know what you're capable of, that means you're a resource that they know is available at least for some chunk of the time that can help alleviate the load on the rest of the team, which means that they can do a better job overall. And I can't think of a single team that wouldn't be happy to have an extra set of hands.
So Peter, this year there was a second crew following around the builders of the pits filming. What happened to all that?
So, Aaron, being the showrunner, ends up dealing with editing. And we haven't had a long break. I mean, Sharkwood was only... So he's still just catching up on that, as well as shooting another show. So that footage exists. How they're going to choose to finally, when they put an edit crew on it and then start dealing with it, I don't know when.
DVD extras?
Whether it's DVD or like just here on the web, check out behind the scenes, day 3, you know, something like that. All right, don't we have costumes to go put on and some drinking to do, people?
Yes. I was going to ask, what sponsors are off limits?
Usually things like Bud and Coca-Cola and, you know, anything that's
fun.
national.
I'm guessing Lincoln.
Lincoln, yeah. Tormont, I mean, can't be sponsored by, well, no, can you? No, you can, actually, you're right. Yes, that's right, Tormont can't sponsor. Joe!
So what days were Greg's company going to New York?
Next week.
Next week.
Next week.
Okay. 850 3rd Ave, number 1003, New York, New York. Let's go break some kneecaps.
Thank you all. By the way, builders, bot builders of BattleBots, look, you guys probably don't hear it much from Greg and Trey, but I say it for them. We can't have a show without what you guys do. It's not like, yeah, Hollywood thinks they can make a show without the robots. We know that you guys make the show. You don't get the thanks.
We love you, Peter.
You don't have to come in. Just show it to me.